Good morning, and it is awesome to be here. Given the time restrictions, we will work quite fast, but Simon is going to make sure you get a copy of all the slides of today, so don't freak out in any way whatsoever. Today's session is a great one because it's all on the leadership side of stuff, and our whole conversation is to think very differently about really getting the strategy right inside of any business. And we're going to give you a little bit of a thought about that ultimately you're the one who actually goes to set the strategy. And the big conversation is to think about like business excellence in a disruptive age. And we operate in a new world where things have fundamentally changed so much with mobile phones and what actually happens with social media. And in minutes, information spreads, and so does disinformation spread. And we're in a position that we've got to literally try to work out what's actually going on in markets. And markets move really quickly with the spread of that information. And the foundational idea here is that what you've got to realize is that good energy is good business. And ultimately, if you've got really great energy, people are going to buy that every day. And what we know is that customer experience is the one thing that literally is timeless, regardless of those market conditions. Now, why this is an important conversation is that you're in a position as a leader to really think about two core foundational ideas, and that's about the conscious choices that you make on the inside of your business, and then the discipline of what you actually bring to the table. So the conscious choices about what we do and when we do it, and the discipline about making sure that we do it on a regular and consistent basis. And why that's the important foundational idea is that most of us are in a position that you have a Ferrari engine for a brain, but you actually have bicycle brakes. Is there anyone here in the room, and hands up, if literally you can overthink a situation? Is there anyone in the room who can do that, yeah? And ultimately, this is the basic foundational idea that because you can overthink a situation, you can also find yourself in completely the wrong spot because you've actually made poor decisions on the way through. But the basic idea is that what we've got to do as leaders is we've got to think about how to be brake specialists and instead to do the things that really get the business to move and grow. And the easiest way to think a little bit about that is that greatness is not a function of circumstance. Greatness, it turns out, is largely a matter of our conscious choices and the discipline. And that quote by Jim Collins gets you to think about where does our business need more discipline more often, and what are the conscious choices that we need to make given the conditions of the day. Now, why this is an important conversation. Great work requires being stubborn about your goals, but flexible about your methods. The best people that we know stick relentlessly to what they want to achieve, but quickly adapt how they'll achieve it when they see a better way. And most people do the opposite. They cling to their methods even when better options appear. And what that's about is the conversation about saying that you all of a sudden become flexible on your goals, but you become rigid on your methods. And what you've got to do is you've got to flip it the other way and say, okay, great, in order to make sure that our business is going to be really successful, we need to make sure that we're really rigid on the goals, but flexible on the methods on how we're actually going to get there. Now, why this is an important contextual conversation is that the number one thing that every organisation has got to get right is its strategy. So if you walked into your business today and you went to your head of sales, or you went to your head of lettings, or you went to head of financial services, you said, hey, what's our strategy this year on how we're planning to nail it? To get more market share, to grow revenue, to grow profitability, to be really good at what we do, could they actually typify what that strategy is? Now, while this is an important conversation, you can have the best operations, but absence of a viable strategy, you're in the process of actually going out of business. So we're going to talk a bit about what that looks like because business goes through effectively a couple of different stages. And the first stage in every business, without a doubt, is what we're going to call early struggle. So when you're in early struggle, you're trying to work out how to do it, you're not really sure about what's actually going on, and then you start to get some basic systemization, and from early struggle, you then move into having a lot of fun with it. And do you remember when business was fun? When all of a sudden you actually enjoyed actually signing an agreement, you enjoyed employing a new staff member, you actually even enjoyed teaching someone how to do the basics of what goes on in your business. But as we get on over time, we actually fundamentally hate doing some of those things, and that's a really important foundational idea because beyond fun, we move into whitewater. Now, whitewater is all of a sudden, how do I deal with all of the different things that are going on? Whether or not it's the renters reform bill or the conversation around new technology or how AI is apparently going to take over your life. And you've got all of these things coming at you, and what you've got to do is you've got to learn how to actually get to something we've got to call predictable success. That we know that if we do this, we get that. And we do this, and we get that. And so we're looking for systems that replicate the success on the inside of our business. And sometimes in our business, we find ourselves just going through on the treadmill, the same actions over and over again where we start to get a bit tired about the business before we then get into a big rut. And then ultimately that then leads to my favourite stage in business in what we actually go to call death rattle. Now the interesting thing is that ultimately businesses that get to a level of predictable success still need to have incredible awareness around what it is that they do and how they go to make it happen. Now, some of you might be aware of a hardware chain over here in the UK called Homebase, and it was bought out by a company from Australia called Bunnings. And Bunnings is the most successful hardware retailer that you'll ever see in the Australian marketplace. They absolutely nail it. Yet when they came to the UK and they bought Homebase, they were kicked out of the UK in under 18 months. And the number one reason why that fundamentally happened, and they burned hundreds of millions of pounds up in the deal, is because they tried to sell barbecues for 12 months a year in a location that uses them for about 6 weeks. So if you don't get the strategy right, then the business fundamentally fails. And why that's an important conversation is you've got to realize that inside of your business, you've got to go back to some models that are going to allow you to get to that level of peak performance. Because the peak performer that you've got today is not necessarily the peak performer that's still going to be there tomorrow or in 5 years or 10 years, because people are going through different things. So whenever I walk into a business, I use this model. I say, okay, great. What life stages are the people that I've got in that business currently going through? Are they single? Are they coupling up? Do they have kids? Have their kids left home? And then beyond life stages, what life events are they going through? Now, life events are a really important foundational idea. Most life events are hopefully really fun and really exciting, having a baby, getting married, doing all of those great things. But sometimes life events are nothing but pure tragedies. You know, the loss of a loved one, something that's going on, the tension that's actually happening inside of a team. And then beyond that, you've then got what we're going to call business cycles. So how do you feel about your business at the moment? Is it on the up and up? Are you feeling energetic about it? Are you feeling like you're getting market share? Are you feeling like the business is really in flow? Or are you in a position that all of a sudden you're starting to feel like the business is coming off? And this is an important foundational idea, because then outside of that, you've got what we're going to call the economic cycle. So whenever I walk into a training room, I think about, okay, what life stages have I got? What life events are people going through? What business cycles are we at? And what's the economic cycle that we're currently facing? And now, given that, and I now know the conditions of the day, what am I going to do strategically to make sure that I actually go to win? Now, why this is an important foundational idea is that in order for a business to be really successful, it must have the core foundations right. And the core foundations are, to think about, first of all, you have to have clarity of purpose. Compass in America probably nailed this the best to help people find their place in the world. And it works with every person, whether or not you're working with somebody who's buying a property, somebody who's leasing a property, if you're managing a property, it is ultimately that whole idea that whether or not you're a receptionist or a negotiator or a valuer, our job is to help you to find your place in the world. And purpose really drives the business. If you think about Nike, you go in there, they want you to feel like an athlete when you put your Nikes on. If you think about Johnson & Johnson, they give you a Band-Aid because they want to alleviate pain in those situations. And if you get the purpose right, it fundamentally drives everything else inside of the business. Outside of purpose, it's about clarity of mission. Mission's a really important thing. How many properties will we let? How many properties will we have under management? How many sales will we do? What market share will we possess? Which markets will we actually play in? And if you've got clarity of purpose and clarity of mission, then you then need to have what we're going to call a set of values. And values need to be really lived out well inside of the business. A great business called Place Estate Agency in Brisbane has a set of values which they go to call Eric or Rice. So respect, innovation, community, and excellence. And everything that you do, are you being respectful? Is there innovation? Is there demonstration of building a better quality community? Are we in a position that we're demonstrating excellence in what it is that we do? If the business doesn't have a set of values, you can't manage behaviours. You can't hire by them, you can't fire by them, you can't actually grow your people. But most importantly, when you're no longer doing the hiring, the people that are doing the hiring in the organisation don't know what to necessarily look for the behaviours of the type of people that you want to scale the business. Outside of that, once we've got our purpose, mission and values, we then need to get really clear on something we go to call STM. And STM is about what is the actual strategy that we've got inside of the business. Tactically, how do we deploy it? And then how do we go to measure that strategy to ensure efficiency around what we do? Now, my lesson on this is to think about this, that if the purpose is the emotional outcome that you achieve for the customer, it is a never-ending pursuit. And the great example of that is Harley-Davidson. They don't actually sell motorbikes. What they sell is the freedom machine. And when you think about that, about being the freedom machine, you jump on that motorbike and all of your issues just melt away. And this is the interesting thing about getting really clear about what purpose is inside of any business. If Nike's is to feel like an athlete, Johnson & Johnson's is to alleviate a pain, then that mission that you set, that very specific set of numbers, needs to be super clear in the business. Are we doing 5,000 lets? Are we doing 5,000 sales? Are we doing 100? Like whatever the number is, how will we know when we've actually hit that level of success? And ultimately, one of the guiding principles can change your entire organisation. Nick Dowling, who is the chairman now of an incredible business called Jealous Craig in Melbourne, has a very simple idea that their pursuit every year is how do we become the number one in each of our chosen markets. So they choose marketplaces, they think about how they become number one in whether or not it be sales or lettings or both, and what would it take in terms of recruitment, in terms of mergers and acquisition, in terms of our strategy to make sure that we could get to that point. And then beyond that, when you think about the values and the rules by which you go and play the game, that has to be the way that you hire and how you go to fire and how you actually go to manage the people inside of your business. But if you don't know the values, then they don't know the values. And if they don't know the values, then they can't live by the values. Now, this is an interesting conversation because when you go and you have a look at that RICE methodology, and you just say, okay, great, how am I living out those values today? Am I a plus on it, as in I really nail it? Am I a dot on it, I'm just so-so? Or am I a minus on it, I'm not actually living them out? Now, if you had a quick look at me and you said, is Josh respectful? He's a minus. Is there innovation? He's a minus. Is he community-minded? He's a minus. Does he demonstrate excellence? He's a minus. Well, then why would I be working inside of the organisation? And that's the interesting foundational piece, is that literally whatever you accept is your standard. So if you accept people that don't live by the values, if you don't live by the values, then that actually becomes the standard across the entire organisation. Now, the lesson is a great one for me because what we do inside of our business is that we actively promote disharmony in our leadership team when forming strategy, and then we then go to unite. And what I mean by that is that literally it's actually okay that not everyone agrees. When we're trying to work out how will we become number one, we actually want robust debate. No, we're not going to do that, or maybe we should do that, and we want to argue a lot. But once we've actually determined what the strategy is going to be, everyone in the organisation has got to unite behind that's actually how we're going to get there. And this is a really important foundational idea because one of the misconceptions is that everyone thinks that the organisation must have a ton of harmony, but harmony doesn't actually produce great results. It does when we align around that particular strategy, but in forming the strategy, you must be prepared to argue. Now, if we think about strategy, it's a really important foundational idea because can you crystallise what you're going to do? And one of my favourite stories at the moment is the one about McDonald's. And what McDonald's did is that they crystallised their strategy in 3 very simple words. They said, what we wanted to do is we want to get really good at digital, we want to get really good at delivery, and we want to get really good at drive-through. So what they did in terms of digital, you can now order off an app, you can order off a website, you can now order off a gigantic iPad inside of the store. And the other key thing that they've done in terms of that digital component is that for the first time ever in Australia this year, they have now launched AI drive-through. So when you're driving through the drive-through, an AI voice now actually takes your order. And it's fascinating to watch how they're doing that. What they also worked out is they had to compete with Uber Eats and Deliveroo and those types of things. So they had to get really good at delivery, but then they had to overhaul drive-through. And the reason why they had to overhaul drive-through is they worked out that if consumers drove past McDonald's and the drive-through looked busy, people kept on driving. So what they did is that rather than deliver the food in the drive-through, they now deliver the food in the overflow car park. And so that way the goal is to make the drive-through look like it's empty, because if it's empty, people are more likely to pull on in, drive on in, get their order, and they'll wait until that order actually turns up. Those 3 little words there that you see on screen was $1.1 billion in extra revenue last year. And what I want you to think about is the typification of their strategy, that in 3 key words, the leadership team has been able to unite people around a vision of how we're actually going to nail the mission this year. Now, inside of any business, what you've got to think about is that measurement is ultimately the tool that you use to course correct, to adjust and to achieve your wildest dreams. Now, just this weekend, we saw the British Formula 1. And when you think about it, they measure what actually happens on that track, how fast every car goes around. And what you're trying to look is to see what would I need to do to get into the number 1 position and to actually win the race. Am I going fast enough? Am I slow enough? Do I need to come in for fuel? When do I change for tyres? But we're looking for constant adjustment. The challenge that actually happens inside of a lot of businesses, we don't know why we're measuring, we don't know what to measure, and we're confused with all of the measurement that actually comes with us. And a really good example about it is what is the success of your social media strategy Is it taps? Is it tap backs, tap forwards, downloads, likes, comments, all of the different things? Or is it ultimately because you're really getting that particular objective of recruitment or being able to sell more property or lease more property? Is that really how you're going to go to measure the success? Now, why this is an important conversation is that Tom Peters said the most important thing that you've got to do, and particularly as a leader, is you've got to be interested. You've got to be interested in people. You've got to be interested in their story. You've got to be interested in their organisation. And the number one thing that people really want from you is they want you to be there and to be in the moment. What we've now got, and you go out to any restaurant, you watch couples, ultimately they're there, and all of a sudden they're on their phone and they're moving up and down and swiping left to right, and a lot of you are wondering what they're doing. Well, they're actually on Rightmove looking for another property, but the basic foundational idea is that what's actually happened is that people don't know how to actually connect in person. And it's an incredible leadership skill set to put away the device and actually get back to a one-to-one conversation. Now, why that's an important conversation is that Tom Peters says you actually have to care. Now, if you're thinking about caring, how do I demonstrate the knowledge? Now, Phil Harris, who leads an incredible organisation called Harris Real Estate in Adelaide, about 4,500 sales, 4,500 properties under management now. Phil said to me that as the team has grown, it's really easy to lose touch with your people. So what he's actually got is he's got a list of all of the people inside of his organisation, and then he's then got a date next to it of the last time that he had a meaningful conversation with them that was outside of a transaction. In other words, about where they're going in life, what's really happening. And then as the organisation's scaled even more, he's now got a list of the top 20% of people inside of his organisation that are cultural leaders. Not necessarily the person who writes the most money or the person who does the most business, but who are the cultural leaders inside of the organisation? It might be a receptionist, it could be someone in operations, it might be someone in admin, it could be the office manager, whatever it might look like. And he says, I must stay really close to those key people because if they leave, the whole thing falls apart very quickly. And what you've got to realise inside of every business is that every single one of us has a best friend at work. And when that best friend leaves, that's when you start to think about leaving as well. So if you went to all of your people in your organisation and you did a nice little survey, and inside of that survey you had 4 or 5 questions, and one of the questions was, hey, who's your best friend at work? Do you actually know who the cliques are inside of your organisation? So that if that person left or was unhappy, then they might influence those people as well. And this is a really important foundational idea to learn more about the culture and the organisation that you want to go to build. Now, why I love this is I want you to think about it, that loyalty, passion, and commitment are dividends of having a strong soft edge, the ability to really care, not just by the numbers, but really making sure that people feel empathetically connected to you. And why this is such an important skill set is that as business continues to gather pace, we tend to spend less and less time in the human moments that actually really matter. Now, if you go and have a look at what actually happens, successful people are more tenacious in seeking out opportunities to really go and accelerate their learning. And what we've now got is a generation who won't turn up with a pen and pad, that won't turn up with a device, they won't actually write any notes. And instead what they'll do is they'll literally just press a button on the phone and have it automatically take all the notes, and apparently then they've got a list of a summary of all of the things that apparently went on, but no one's actually retaining any information about the meeting that they were actually just in. And so you've got a lazy generation that is actually in a position that has actually got this huge issue that they've got no attention. So the ability to have attention and to be in the moment is going to be your superpower as a leader into the future. Now, if I have a look at that, I think about this. How do I fail, or how should I fail in ways that lead to the type of skill development and belief systems that allow me to go to succeed long term? And why this is a really important conversation is that we are in a position that leaders prevent their people from failing, which actually prevent their people from growing. And I think about this all the time, that you actually have to fail because failure is the thing that teaches you a lot more than winning actually does. But inside of your organisation, what we say is that a mistake made once is a mistake, but a mistake made twice is a decision. So there's a difference between not following a system, not following a process, versus doing something for the first time, not getting it right, but then learning how to go and do it. And this is a really important part that we want to encourage failure inside the organisation more often. Now, one of the things that's interesting is that the quicker that you grow someone from zero to hero, the faster that your business is going to go and scale. And so the lesson is, what do we do to go and grow our people? Now, this has been an interesting conversation because performance is about getting people to really be at their best. And what I want you to think about is that how do you make sure their energy is right, that their goals are aligned, that they're in a position that they're feeling good about who they are and what it is that they're doing. And this is why it's important to start to uplift the people inside of your organisation, to give them really good quality energy and to make sure that you're connecting in powerful ways. So how you grow, train and develop your people actually really matters. So if you went back into your organisation and said, how do we grow people around here? How do we train our people around here? How do we actually go to develop our people around here? You know, giving them exciting assignments, giving them different things to do, getting them to help us to form strategy on how we're going to go and nail it in the number one position. This is an important foundational idea that you must give work to people before they're actually ready. And if you don't do that and you continue to get in the way, then you actually go to prevent your people's growth. Now, why I like that is that literally one of the great skills that we've learned is management by walking around. The skill set of making sure that you don't build a hierarchy, that you can literally walk the floor, talk to your people, have really good quality conversations, visit your branches as you start to grow geographically to make sure that you're still connected to the people inside of your organisation. Now, the skill here is to think about it, that if you have that defined call list of the top 20% of cultural leaders inside of your business, well, how does your list vary compared to the other founders or other directors or leaders inside of your business? And what you want to be doing is you really want to think about a very simple methodology that we go to start to think about the family, the village, and the tribe. So the family is about maybe 6, 7, or 8 people that are very connected to you. You know them on a daily basis, you text them on a daily basis, there's lots of good quality emotional connection. You can only really influence those top 8 or so people at a maximum. After that, we then literally start to think about more broadly that the village is all of the people that might be sitting inside of the office or all of the people that might be sitting more broadly across that particular discipline. Now, that might be 30 or 40 people. And then outside of that, then the tribe more broadly is about what actually happens across the rest of the organisation. In sitting down with a conversation with Nick Dowling recently, he said the challenge is that most leaders forget that the 8 people that are around them that are the most connected are their most important hires. Because if you get the hiring right on those 8 people that are most connected to you, that are your service line managers or are key people inside of the business, if you don't get that right, then they have all the bad influence over the balance of the organisation. So it's really an important foundational idea to think who are the key foundational 8 people inside of your business, and are they preventing growth or are they encouraging growth across the business? And then what you want to think about is that how do you actually encourage more people to become best friends at work? Now, the interesting idea here is that what you want to do is you want to build an organisation that is foundationally filled with people that we go to call the learn-it-alls, as opposed to people that are called know-it-alls. And what we hear a lot inside of businesses is that people will come to a session. Oh, how was that today? Oh, yeah, no, it was okay, but I already knew all of that. You know, there was nothing new. As though all of a sudden they need to see something new in order to actually think there's a different way to uncover it. And all of a sudden I walk into estate agency businesses and people say, will you still talk about sellers? Yeah. Will you still talk about owners who are going to be leasing out their properties? Yeah. Will you still talk about tenants? Yep. Will you still talk about buyers? Yep. Because that's actually what we do. Now, the foundational idea, you can't have a chef who gets bored about food. You have to be really excited about food if you're going to be in the chef game. If you're going to be in the estate agency game, you have to get really excited about the actions that you go to undertake. Now, why I kind of like this is I've got to get you to think about it. The brand is the talent. And you are, without a doubt, 1 or 2 more hires away from a completely different business. And this is the foundational idea about a guy by the name of Con Stathopoulos. Now, Con is an incredible operator. He does a podcast with me. And one of the key things that Con says is that literally the number one thing that you must be doing is to always be recruiting. How many of your competitors might actually be a merger and an acquisition target? How many people that are working inside of the real estate industry should actually be coming to work for you? And this is why it's a really important foundational idea that if you don't ask someone or have the conversation or start to build a relationship, then how will they ever consider you to be a workplace of the future? At the end of the day, the reason why people move organisations is because they're really unhappy with where they were working, or they're actually moving to an organisation that's got a bigger and a better and a stronger vision. So your job as the leader is to set the vision. Where are you going with your life? What would you like to achieve? How will we help you to do that? Let's get you into a more visionary conversation. Now, Con in the last 5 years has gone from 90 to over 2,000 sales transactions in a 5-year time frame. And that does not happen by just getting a little bit lucky. That happens by a very clear, determined effort to say, that every Friday is recruiting day, where he's in a position that he's thinking, okay, who are the key people that I want inside of organizations? I then go and connect with them on a LinkedIn. I see who they're connected with. If I know they're good friends with Josh, I ring up Josh and say, hey, what do you know about this person? Start to see whether or not there's a mutual relationship or a key person that we could go to influence. Then what happens from there is that then we ring them and we actually have the conversation with them. Hey Mark, it's Josh. I just thought I'd give you a quick call. Mate, I know that we're competitors, but I've always really respected you from afar. Hey, I know that you're probably really loyal and you probably love what it is that you're actually doing today. But if you're ever in a position that you needed a plan B, I'd be more than thrilled to have the discussion with you. And you know what? Everyone needs a plan B in life if plan A doesn't actually happen right. So what I'm going to say to you, if ever you want to have the conversation, just literally pick up the phone. It's good to have a friend in the business. If you just need to get out some frustrations, have a bit of a chat from time to time, I'd be thrilled to do that with you. And Condas does that over and over every Friday. Just literally keeps on going after the key talent inside of his business and keeps on continuing to grow the organization because he's really clear about establishing the opportunity that can sit inside of any business. And why this is an important conversation is that if you think about it, you've got to be able to define the strategy. And one of the big things that we've done this year is we've really focused on building out what we're going to call STM charts. And an STM chart is basically your strategy, your tactics, and your measurement. And it's about looking at very specific things that you can do that allow your business to go to perform at its absolute best. And the lesson to me is a really great one because I think about it, okay, from today's presentation alone, what are the foundations that I've got to get right? And this is the good check-in. Is the clarity of the vision of the business like super clear? So if I rang up our front receptionist or I rang up the organisation, or if I spoke to my head of lettings or I spoke to my head of sales or I had the conversation with my head of financial services, what would they tell me that the vision of the business actually is? And it should be made up of those components. Are they clear about what the purpose is? Are we really clear about what it is that we're doing? And this is an important conversation because if the purpose of the business is clear, then the work actually becomes super easy. The next conversation is then say, okay, great, is the mission clear? And when do we reset that mission? Is that done as we move into the second half of this year, for July through to December? Is it a different number? Are we thinking about what we're doing over the course of the next 12 months? Are we thinking about where we're taking the organisation over the course of the next 5 years? If you lease a commercial premises for 5 years, then surely you would have a 5-year plan for your business on how big you want it to be and where you want it to go and what you'd like it to go and achieve. And that's why the clarity about making sure that the mission is ridiculously clear is really important. And then outside of that, making sure that the values are lived inside the organisation. Now, we went and we did some work for House & House estate agents over in Dubai. And when I went there in 2018, they actually had 41 values. And I sat down with the director, Luke, and Simon. I said, hey, I'm just going to take a pen. And I wrote down the numbers 1 to 41. I said, can you please now tell me what each of the 41 values are? And we couldn't even get to one. I said to them, so we think that we've got values, but we actually don't have values. So in the transformation of the organisation, we ended up having 5 core values. And one of the values that sits inside of their business is this really basic foundational idea that we work when we work. And the problem is that we had all these people going to Dubai, getting all of this beautiful sunshine, and not wanting to work anymore, because all of a sudden it's always good weather. You never have to cancel anything for bad weather when you're in Dubai. But now that we've got that foundational value right, the organisation has absolutely scaled like there's no tomorrow because they've got all of the foundations right. Getting the strategy right, the tactics and the measurement. Now, Macca's came with what? Digital delivery and drive-through. The Josh Phegan business came with 3 very simple letters, KJT. And it's what we've got to call Keep Josh Talking. So the basic idea, and I could just typify that for my entire business, anything that's not me talking, I don't do. And it lets my head of operations do what operations does. It lets my head of sales do what sales does. It lets my head of marketing and syndication do what marketing and syndication does. But could you typify strategy that clearly for your organisation? Say, hey, that's actually where we're going and what we're going to do. And to get the tactics right and to then make the measurement come forward. The next conversation is to make sure that you set the strategy. Inside of any estate agency business, there's probably only 3 or so things that you'll probably play with. And that's the whole idea about how do we increase our average fee. One of the best things that the Australian and New Zealand model has done compared to the UK model is being in a position to debundle. And we basically learnt it from EasyJet, where you might all of a sudden get your £100 flight over to Spain, but then you want to take your bag, it's another £200. And the basic idea is that they debundled the ticket from the actual baggage, and therefore they made you pay extra as a part of that. And one of the key things that literally has driven it and this is the crazy thing, in Australia now, on average, to list a particular property on a portal is £2,500 per property per portal. So you're now talking about circa £5,000 to list a property in Australia. So the owner motivation changes, the agent motivation shifts, the production of video content changes, what we're now doing in terms of Instagram, what's happening with TikTok. And we're all there, by the way, according to YouTube Shorts, that you're 6 to 8 hours a day on a mobile device. What are you watching? You're watching videos. What sort of videos are you watching? Property videos. And if you think about what's going on, we need to evolve, because the content that literally can be produced through the transactions that we're already doing can change the game. So we have a free option where all of a sudden it's included in the fee, but can we have an upsell option and start at £100 and take it at £200 and start to see whether or not you can get improvement? And what we did here is we got really good at payment methodologies, so people can pay via credit card, or they can do buy now, pay later, or they can literally do a funds transfer between bank accounts. We made it super simple for consumers. But learning how to go to do that and getting the strategy right is that average fee might not be increasing the fee, it might be debundling and starting to charge just that little bit extra for around what it is that you do in terms of the marketing components. Now, you've got to get that right. You're going to fail a few times before you nail the strategy, but it's a really important foundational bit to drive margin inside of any business. The second conversation is to get your average sale or average let price up. So where are the more expensive homes, or where are the more expensive apartments or units that you actually look after, and what can you do to drive market share in that particular area? And then outside of that is that how do we go to do more volume? So how do we actually get really, really good at getting all of the searches done up front to make sure that we can minimize any of the fall through? What can we do to make sure that we're using the right solicitors, to make sure that that process is as smooth as possible, to then make sure that ultimately we can get more of the properties that we put to offer agreed to actually get to completion day. And this is about literally getting the strategy right around what it is that you do. And what we find is a lot of businesses are tactically excellent, but yet they are strategically negligent. So they don't know why they do what they do. They just keep on doing the same old actions, but not thinking about why it's an important foundational idea to drive any of those three. Outside of that, the conversation around literally getting vendor paid marketing was debundling, but also to doing the large, medium, and small, having the small as the included option, and then upselling people to the medium or upselling them to the large. And then getting your payment options right to make it super easy for people to go and pay. Now, beyond that, the conversation is then about maximizing customer base. So whenever I walk into an organization, I often say, okay, great. How many past clients have bought from you? How many past clients have sold through you? When the past client buys, where did they come from? When the past client sells, where do they move to? If they move to a neighbouring suburb, if they move to a neighbouring community, if they move to a slightly higher average sale price, you now have a relationship with them, and they live in a more expensive home that you could actually sell or let for them in their behalf in the future if you actually look at what we go to call past client transitional data or data. And the lesson is a really important foundational piece, because then when I walk inside of an organisation, where do all of your landlords actually live? And of all the landlords that handed back their investment properties or sold them or did something else, where do those archive landlords actually live as well? And so we're looking at the geographical data about where we might have a huge penetration of customer base that we're just simply not doing anything with. And this is ultimately a basic idea that the fish, they're at your feet. They're right here in front of you. And you want to go and advertise on the tube, and you want to advertise on the side of a bus, and you want to do heaps of other things. You want to go and tout for business. But yet you've got so many people sitting inside of your existing ecosystem that we just don't have a defined strategy on how we really move to execution. And that's about, therefore, going to have a look at all the previous valuations, what we go to call market appraisals, that you've done in the past to make sure that you're really clear about what you could do to go to execute. Now, outside of that, one of the great conversations we spoke about today was about recruitment. And if you're going to get really good at recruitment, then you've got to start to actually fundamentally ask yourself some really core questions. Why do people leave organisations? Dysfunction, bad culture, bad facilities, lack of income. The number one driver, without a doubt, is the lack of the feeling of progress. That they're not actually growing inside of their roles. They're not actually growing in terms of their potential. They're not really growing in terms of what they can produce in terms of income. Then ultimately, why do people actually stay? Because they've got great relationships with people. They actually stay inside of an organisation because they don't know they could go anywhere else. They've become institutionalized. They've been walking into the same dark room for 20 years, and they don't think there's any rooms that actually have any light. They've actually lost all hope that there are actually better organizations. But if you don't talk to people about them, if you don't get them to do a factory tour, if you don't get them to come and see your business, then how will they know that literally there are better conditions actually there? And then after that literally, why do people come to join? The best people to go ask that are your new joiners. Why did you actually come to work with us? Oh, well, I really like what you did, or I saw that thing you put up on Instagram. I really like that thing about what you've been doing, or I always see that you're really lovely to people when you go to get your hair cut, if you're lucky enough to do that. And then ultimately, really thinking that in order for an organization to really grow, don't you just need like a list of 5 key people of what I go to call top tier talent list of 5 people right now that I'm trying to build a relationship with that I'd love to work with me. And regardless of whether or not they're going to work with me today or work with me in 20 years' time, I'm just going to continue to build a relationship with that person so that when that moment comes, then all of a sudden we can actually go and make it happen. And that's about then thinking about what it is that we do in terms of the packaging. Now imagine that I said to you, okay, great, I'm going to be the transformational CEO inside of your organization. You're now on the board. And I'm going to show you, hey, this is what we're actually going to do this year. In order for us to get to number 1 in our chosen markets, we are going to lay the foundations. We're going to make sure that we've got a really clear strategy around average sale price, fee, and volume. We're going to get really clear about vendor paid marketing and potentially debundling to drive fee. We're going to maximize our customer base, and we're going to get really good at recruitment. Would you be super confident that those things are going to help us to go and achieve the mission? Now, that doesn't have to be the plan, but in the absence of a plan, adopt that pretty quickly. But the basic idea is that now what you're actually seeing is a strategically laid out plan in 1 page or less that tells you about where we're going as an organization and what it is that we're actually going to go and do next. And that's a really important foundational idea. I love this little quote that I can only dream as far as I can see, and when I get there, I can always see further. And what I want you to think about is that ultimately the position that you're in today was probably but a distant dream when you first started. And then all of a sudden what actually starts to happen is you build momentum, you build capability, you get to meet more people. And as all of a sudden you do that and you start to get to business success, sometimes you can become complacent about where you're at, when in fact what you need to be doing is you need to be setting the vision for what it is that you want to go and do. And Mark Cuban says it best, business is the ultimate sport. And when you think about it as being a sport, how do we assemble the very best team to go out there against the very best competitors and to make sure that then we actually go to win? And that's really where the skill set is to making sure you're incredible around what it is that you do. Well, I really hope you've enjoyed our little fast-paced session this morning. Got a little break until we go to kick in to our next little one. And thanks so much for your attention this morning.